Are these stories real? Please, you tell us. What I mean is, did any of the following actually happen as described in these scary stories? Halloween, Holidaysburg, Hound. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I grew up near Holidaysburg, Pennsylvania. When I was a teenager, I had a group of friends who would hang out together in that area. On some days, we would get some more guys and play a baseball or softball game depending on what kind of equipment we had available. I remember more than one time when we started with a baseball, lost it, and continued with a softball. We didn't care, it was for fun. Our favorite field to play on was the large one behind the elementary school over there. I think it actually might have belonged to the high school or something, I don't know. There were 4 or 5 baseball fields in the area, and this was the second largest one. We loved it because the outfield wall was essentially the tree line of the forest, so it had a kind of Field of Dreams vibe to it. I know that was a cornfield or wheat or whatever, and we had a forest, but it was that same sense of natural awe and mystery in both cases, as though nature had collaborated in the creation of the field, making it more of a sacred act to play a game there than just a mere pastime. Looking back on it, I don't think we were supposed to be playing on any of those fields. I think they were all private property belonging to the schools that had all been built next to each other over there. Since there were never more than 12 or 14 of us max, and since we would play at times when the fields were unoccupied, nobody ever interfered with our unofficial impromptu baseball games. After each epic matchup, my core group of guys, there were between 5 and 7 of us depending on the day, would go hang out in the woods past the outfield for a while before it got too dark, then we'd each head on home. It was getting to be Halloween time this one year, which meant a lot to me personally. I was born about a half hour after Halloween, just missing it and greeting the world on All Saints' Day or All Souls' Day, November 1st, instead. It was also an exciting time of year for my friends because we were such big baseball fans. We loved the playoffs and the World Series, and a lot of the time we would play as though we were one playoff team against another. So that meant we would go up to the plate imitating the batting stances of the particular hitters as we had seen them hit on TV, and when possible, we would even try to copy the deliveries of the famous pitchers on either team. It was a lot like playing MLB The Show now, except we would actually be out there playing the games. The fields were less occupied in October, but it wasn't winter yet, so that was probably when we played the majority of our games each year. Okay, I know you're waiting for the Dogman part, but I needed to explain the scenario and why I was hanging out in the woods at dusk with a bunch of other guys. It wasn't anything weird, and we weren't worshipping Moloch or anything like that. We were just hanging out and being teenagers for a little while longer before heading home to be ordered around by our parents who wished we would either go back to acting like kids or just move out. It was our last bit of freedom for the day. I don't remember a lot of specifics about that time in my life, but I remember that we were trying to scare each other that night in the woods. It was close to Halloween, like I mentioned before, and we were trying to tell the scariest stories we could remember. I told the chicken heart story. Thump, 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 thump. The chicken heart that grew so large, it crushed everything near it. Thump, 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 thump. The chicken heart that grew so immense that it flattened an entire city, so vast that it had its own gravity and drew a helicopter down to crash into it. Thump, 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 thump. I didn't succeed in scaring the others, but then they each took their turns and they sure as heck scared me. One of them told a story about a hook-handed killer who stalked the Lover's Lane, located just on the other side of these very woods. I didn't know there was a Lover's Lane around there yet, as I had not had a serious girlfriend, and I didn't have my driver's license yet. In fact, I don't even know now if there was one there. All I know is that my friend insisted there was, He made me believe it, and he made us all believe that a hook-handed killer liked to lurk in these very woods. That completely freaked me out, and when we thought we heard someone moving through the trees in the growing darkness, our first thought was not that it might be a deer. Our first thought was that it must be the hook-handed killer. We began backing out of the woods toward the outfield, watching behind us, as it sounded as though whatever was out there was approaching us quickly. It was just as I was at the edge of the wood line, standing at the border between the outfield and the forest, looking back at my friends coming up behind me, that I first saw the monster. I noticed its eyes as they glowed in the dark which was hiding the rest of it. I thought it was a big cat at first, as illogical as that would be to find in that part of the world. It was because it appeared to be 4 or 5 feet tall, and it had eye shine. The thing is, those eyes then rose up in height to prove that whoever they belonged to was taller than any of us. I screamed at the sight of that, even before I had made out the full silhouette of the creature. Then my friends screamed too, some of them because they looked back and saw what I was seeing, the rest because our screaming had alarmed them. We broke out into full runs, racing back onto the playing field and out of the woods. The field was not lit up, but there was a lot more ambient light out there than existed under the tree canopy. When I reached second base, I turned around to see if my friends were all out of the woods and if the incredibly tall big cat was still following us as well. Well, my friends all made it out. I did a head count. I could finally see what was chasing us, but it was not a cat as I had expected. Standing there, upright and bipedal between 2 trees at the edge of the forest, was an over 6 foot tall, dog-headed caveman sort of a guy. He was dark gray or black, which explained why I only saw his eyes back in the woods. He was clearly taller than any of us, and I think we were all an inch or 2 under 6 feet at that point. I'm not good at judging height, but this was a tall fellow. His ears stood up on top of his head, almost like the ears on Batman's cowl. He had a massive, human chest and long, ape-like arms, but I did not see clearly what its paws or feet looked like. Maybe grass blocked my view, or maybe I just didn't make mental notes about those parts of what I was seeing. I was mainly trying to figure out if we were in the clear yet, or if it was going to continue to chase us. I think it was still considering its options as I got my one view of it. The dogman, or whatever it was, stepped backward into the woods, but I knew it was still watching us as we continued to get on out of there. After we had gotten a few blocks away under the streetlights in front of private homes, walking down streets we had grown familiar with, one of us asked if the others of us had just done that as a Halloween prank. It's funny that none of us thought of that as it was happening, but only some minutes afterward. Nobody was willing to take credit for having scared the living daylights out of the rest of us. So I am still, many years later, of the belief that what we saw was some kind of a real something. It couldn't have been a man in a costume, or at least it seems incredibly unlikely. Humans don't produce eye shine, so he would have had to be wearing contacts maybe, or a mask which gave off the illusion of eye shine. Then he would have had to navigate in a pitch black forest as fast as a bunch of fairly athletic young men while wearing the contacts or dogman mask. At some point, even Occam's razor says it's more likely to have been a real animal of some sort. Could it have been a bear? It didn't look to me like one, and it was able to move quicker than any upright walking bear I've ever seen. Could it have been a bear with mange? Sometimes they can look very dog-like. Bears with mange are sick, and they're usually losing their fur, revealing lighter colored skin underneath. This creature was dark all over, and its ears were pointed, not round like a bear's ears. The other thing was My friends and I were all completely freaked out by this thing. I mean, it scared the bejeebus out of us. Would a bear have frightened us that much? Maybe, I guess, after hearing scary stories. The next day, the guys started acting like the whole thing was just a Halloween prank. I guess it felt less scary that way. We never spoke about it all that much after that, and when we did, we called it, that Halloween prank somebody pulled on us, or the werewolf prank, and things like that. Like I said before, nobody ever took credit for this epic prank, and we had no proof it wasn't real, but we also had never heard of Dogman at that time, and we knew werewolves couldn't be real, so it had to have been a prank as far as we were concerned back in the days following our sighting of the Halloween Hollidaysburg Hound. I'm Henrey Lee Dogman, and I'm here to say we couldn't do this show without the fans who pay. Today's executive producer is Godzilla Tim. I'm sure that you've all heard of him. When he leaves a comment, it's a thriller, because he's Timothy Godzilla. Please join us in thanking Godzilla Tim Walker for making today's episode possible. If you'd like to be a VIP and keep our show alive like Godzilla Tim, just join our paid subscribers club at peterbernard.com or by clicking the join link below. You'll gain access to our brand new Sunday night episodes in which we tell secret uncensored stories that we could never tell on this channel. Dr. Death will be back at the end of this show to tell you more about that. But first, I'd like to tell you a story about a New Jersey cryptid, and we call this next one the Dixontown Road Dogfoot. Dear Scary Stories NYC, this story happened back in the 80s when I had a job helping to deliver fax machines and printers to places in the New York area. A couple of times we got lost out where that Jersey Devil is supposed to live. We never saw him, but it actually was a weird vibe, and both times you really kind of expected to see him. To me, the Pine Barrens and areas in Vineland, New Jersey feel like Halloween, even when you drive through them in July. The only actual cryptid I've ever seen, though, was this inexplicable dog-like Bigfoot sort of thing we almost ran into while driving on Dixontown Road in Medford, New Jersey. Looking back on it, I'd say that it was probably what we would nowadays call a dogman. The situation with that job was that I would ride shotgun with this guy we can call Sam who would drive. The printing machines back then could sometimes be very large, and I did my share of the heavy lifting. Offices would use things as big as a Xerox machine as compared to modern printers. I was good enough at carrying things, but I wasn't very good at any other aspect of the job. I was young and I didn't take any of it seriously. I knew it wasn't going to be my career, whereas this was a serious gig for the driver. My partner Sam was good at finding things on Long Island or upstate New York, but in New Jersey, he'd mainly rely on my map reading abilities, which were horrible. Over there around Medford or Medford Lakes in New Jersey, they've got a lot of little tiny neighborhoods on little curvy suburban streets, like out of that movie Poltergeist. I don't know if they were also built over native burial grounds by the Pathmark Man, but to us, each of them looked the same as the previous one. Between the similarity of their design and me associating them with that horror movie, we would both get confused when delivering around there. Most of the time we were delivering to offices and stores which were easier to find. You could stop and ask someone where a store was, and they would usually know. You can't do the same when delivering to people's homes in these identically unique little suburban enclaves. This was one of those times when we had to locate a number of private residences, and it was a long and hard day. We finally delivered the last machine as the sun was beginning to set. Heading off in the growing darkness onto Dixontown Road, our intent was to jump on some highway heading back up north to New York City. I don't remember how we were planning to do it, but we always tried to avoid toll roads, so I know we still had a lot of driving ahead of us. Now, Sam was a pretty straight arrow kind of a guy. He had one slight vice, which was that he would sometimes, after a long day, pull the van over onto the side of a highway, standing outside alone, and smoke a cigarette. He made it clear early on that this was his private time, and I wasn't to say a word to him until it was over. I think he was annoyed with my bad map reading on that particular day, but rather than have an argument about it, he would just go have his smoke, breathe the air, look at the trees, calm down, and then drive both of us home. Sometimes things don't work out as planned, however, and as I sat in the driver's seat, tapping the dashboard in time with music on the radio, Sam suddenly came flying back into the van, slamming the door behind him. He looked pale, and Sam had a deep suntan. He looked kind of sick, actually, so I was confused why he would jump in the driver's seat if he was about to be ill. He told me to roll up my window, and I was confused. He revved the engine while shouting at me to turn off the radio. I hit the button, killing the sound, and Sam got the motor going and put the van into drive. I had forgotten that he had told me to roll up my window, and then, before Sam could get us moving, a thick, hairy, long arm reached into the window to my right, passing in front of my face, grabbing at Sam to my left. It was under my nose, and I smelled this arm. I accidentally tasted the hair on this arm. I'm sure you'll believe me when I tell you that it was nasty. Maybe that was what caused the owner of the arm to pull it back out of the window. I do not know. The important thing is that when the arm was back outside, Sam hit the gas before it could reach back in. He screamed at me using foul language that he had told me to roll up my window. I heard what he was saying, but I still had no idea whose arm I had just smelled and tasted. So, rather than rolling the window up, I leaned my head out, looking back behind us, and that was the moment when I saw a running, bipedal, dog-headed man chasing us. He was bipedal for a few seconds anyway, and then he dropped to all fours and seemed to really pick up the pace. That was all I wanted to see. I pulled myself back in, rolled that window up, and informed Sam that it looked like the thing could run 50 or 60 miles an hour. Sam looked like he was about to shout at me more, but then I saw his eyes doing the math based on what I just told him, and he shut up and focused on getting us the hell out of there. I never looked in the rear view, and that van had one on the passenger side. I didn't want to see it again. I didn't want to know if we were outpacing it. I just trusted Sam's survival instincts, and I stared out ahead of us. I could tell by Sam's posture and behavior when we were finally safe. Sometimes I wish I had monitored the creature's progress behind us, as it would make for a better and more detailed story to tell. The truth is, I was too scared to look out at it. Sometimes people say they experienced an unnatural sense of fear when they encountered a dogman. Having the arm of a big, hairy monster shoved in my face seems like something that it should be quite natural to have a great fear of. I'm not proud of myself, but I was very stunned by the experience when it happened. I was not prepared for anything like that to happen. I didn't even know that sort of thing could happen. The only hairy monster I knew about back then was Bigfoot, and they were only supposed to be in Washington State and Canada. That's what they used to say on TV back then anyway. They also used to say that Bigfoot was shy and afraid of mankind. I had never heard of a dogman, and neither had Sam. We actually gave it our own name that we made up on the spot, Dogfoot. It was like a Bigfoot, but with a dog's head. People sometimes ask me if the creature had feet like a Bigfoot or like a dog, and I really didn't make note of that at the time. I know that the front arm seemed like the arm of a human, mixed with a chimp or gorilla when it was under my nose. When I saw it drop to all fours and run, though, it looked like a giant dog or a wolf to me. I guess that must be the answer to the question about the size of the feet. They must have been like dog legs for it to have run that way. Unless, and this is something I've only read about in a few cases, could it be possible that it had human or Sasquatch type feet when it was bipedal, but morphed into dog's limbs when it needed to run faster. I mean, if it were a werewolf we saw out there in New Jersey, then it could be a shapeshifter. Would it be that much harder to believe that a shapeshifter could have a few different Dogman-shaped models he or she could shift into? My sighting was so brief and was so bizarre that I can't rule the shape-shifting ideas out. That having been said, I do not recall actually seeing anything change when the monster dropped to all fours to chase us. When it did that, I felt really unhappy inside. I felt like we might be about to meet our maker, and I didn't know if we would make it back to New York City. I was sad. I was scared. And so it was not my best moment. Having those strange things happen on that night in the way they did changed me. I know people say things like that casually. Oh, that movie changed me. Oh, that reggaeton rap changed me. But having a Dogman's arm in my face, then wondering if it could outrun our van, that really scared me. It changed every moment of my life afterward. I'm concerned each time I turn a corner that a giant monster might be on the other side. I have a paranoia about opening doors. In my home, I have a video system set up with monitors outside each door. This way I can look inside the room on video before opening the door. Laugh if you will, but I've never accidentally walked in on a Dogman, and I credit my video system with that. Seriously though, I've been in therapy ever since then, and that's because I've got serious issues about what might be lurking in my blind spot. What's behind me? I look behind myself so often I sometimes resemble a schizophrenic, and I don't mean that in a rude way, I mean it in a literal way. I like to sit in front of mirrors so that I can see what's behind me without looking over my shoulder. Nobody has patience with this quirk about me, and I can't say I blame them. I can't say I blame myself either, though, because I'm the only man in history who can claim he tasted the Dixontown Road Dogfoot.
Thanks for watching till the end. If you liked what you saw, please consider clicking like on the video or sharing it. You can become a channel member by clicking the join link below. Then you can check our community page to find the links to 10 hours or more of secret, uncensored Dogman stories too wild to be told on this channel. Your other option is to join our paid subscribers club at peterbernard.com. That's Peter's homemade club, where he will personally email you the links as well as occasional secret club messages. You may also be included as an executive producer in a future episode. If you have a scary experience you want to tell us about, you can email us at scarystoriesnyc@gmail.com, or else call our Scary Stories voicemail hotline at 804-LESS-SCARY. The machine cuts off every few minutes, so if you have a long story, please keep calling back and we'll piece it together later on. Good night, and have a scary tomorrow.
Come back for more scary stories.